The body had been there for hours before anyone dared to speak. It lay on the ground, still and lifeless, surrounded by whispers that never reached a conclusion. No one knew who had killed him, and no one claimed to have seen anything. The streets that once felt familiar now felt dangerous because a single death had turned certainty into fear. A crime without an answer does something strange to people. It doesn't just demand justice, it demands responsibility, and responsibility is something people often try to escape. The crowd gathered quickly, not to solve the mystery, but to distance themselves from it. Every face carried the same unspoken fear, quietly hidden behind concern. What if it was me? What if they think it was me? What if the truth destroys us? Someone mentioned Musa's name, not because they fully trusted him, but because prophets have a way of absorbing problems others don't want to carry. They went to him together, pretending to seek guidance, but really seeking relief. They wanted the burden lifted and the danger removed without forcing anyone to look too closely at themselves. They asked Musa to call upon his Lord and ask him to reveal the truth, to identify the killer. They wanted a miracle, but only the kind that cost them nothing. Musa listened without interruption, without accusation. When they finished speaking, he said something that made no sense to them at all. Allah commands you to slaughter a cow. The words landed softly, too softly. There was no thunder, no explanation, no obvious connection between a dead man and a cow. For a moment, they thought he was joking. A cow? Someone laughed. Another voice followed, sharper this time, asking whether Musa was mocking them. When people feel exposed, they often respond with offense. Musa did not react. He did not defend himself or explain the command. He simply said that he sought refuge in Allah from being among the ignorant. The command stood as it was, clear, simple, and undeniable, and that is where the real test began. They could have ended it there. They owned cows, and the land was full of them. Any cow would have done at any moment. But obedience without conditions feels dangerous to people who want control. So they asked a question. What kind of cow is it? Not because the command was unclear, but because questions buy time. Musa answered calmly and patiently. It was neither old nor young, somewhere in between. That should have been enough. But obedience delayed feels more comfortable than obedience fulfilled. They asked again about its color. Yellow, bright, pleasing to the eye. Still, they did not move. They asked again for more detail. A cow not used for labor, untouched by the soil. With every answer, the command became harder, not because Allah complicated it, but because they forced him to. Slowly, without realizing it, they turned obedience into negotiation. They began to search reluctantly, not eagerly. They asked around, counted, and measured until they realized something uncomfortable. There was only one cow left that matched the description, and it belonged to an orphan. Suddenly, obedience had a price. The cow was not easily sold, and if it was, it cost more than they were willing to give. The guardians of the orphan knew its value, not just in money, but in leverage. The people hesitated, argued, complained, and blamed Musa. Why had he made it so difficult? Why so many details? Why couldn't Allah have been clearer? But the truth was uncomfortable. Allah had been clear from the beginning. They were the ones who kept asking. Eventually, cornered by their own delay, they paid the price. The cow was slaughtered, not willingly or eagerly, but barely. Only then did Musa speak again. He told them to strike the dead man with a part of the cow. The command sounded absurd, but they had come too far to stop. They did it, and what happened next was unmistakable. The dead man rose, not fully and not for long, but just long enough to speak and point to his killer. Then he fell silent again. The truth stood exposed, the killer revealed, justice given a face, and the impossible witnessed with their own eyes. Allah had shown them a sign of resurrection, proof that life can return and death is not the end. But instead of relief, there was discomfort, and instead of humility, there was distance. The miracle had not softened their hearts. It had only exposed them. The cow was never about solving a murder. It was about people who believe until belief asks something of them. People who accept guidance until it interferes with convenience. People who trust Allah until trust requires surrender. They had not rejected Allah openly. They had resisted Him politely, with questions, with conditions, with delays disguised as caution. This is the most dangerous kind of resistance because it feels reasonable. They could always say they were trying to understand, trying to be careful, trying to get it right. But obedience is not an exam. It is a response, and every extra question had turned response into avoidance. Allah preserved this story not because of the cow, but because of the pattern, a pattern that repeats itself across generations. We delay what is clear, complicate what is simple, and negotiate commands that were never meant to be negotiated. We ask questions not to learn, but to escape action, and we do it quietly. We say just one more clarification, just one more detail, just let me be sure. But certainty was never the issue. Control was. Bani Israel wanted truth without submission, guidance without surrender, and answers without obedience. The cow exposed that conflict, because the moment obedience becomes conditional, faith has already weakened. Weakened faith does not collapse loudly. It erodes silently. The Quran does not tell this story to mock them, but to warn us. The greatest danger to faith is not disbelief, it is delay. Delay that feels intelligent, justified, and thoughtful. Until one day obedience feels heavy. Until one day the simple feels impossible. Until one day faith exists only in words. The dead man returned to life for a moment, but many hearts remained lifeless, and that is the real tragedy. The cow was slaughtered, the murderer revealed, and the miracle completed. But the lesson remains unfinished because it does not belong to them alone. It belongs to anyone who believes faith is something to be analyzed endlessly rather than lived. Anyone who replaces trust with caution, anyone who thinks obedience must always make sense before it is followed. Allah does not ask questions in return. He asks action. And the distance between belief and obedience is where most faith is lost, not in denial, but in delay.